It's getting to the point now with just the name Sweet Baby Inc. alone is enough to deter any future player base on a game away from that game. And we've seen it a countless number of times when it comes to Sweet Baby Inc. We've seen it with the Suicide Squad game, and we know how that pile of crap turned out, having less than 1,000 players playing the new Season 2 update. And now we have Flintlock losing up to 70% of its player base, which was already dead on arrival. This game didn't even hit 1,000 peak players on Steam. It just shows you that this name alone is enough to make players run away. And on top of that, we also had news that this company has worked on Wolverine in turning Jean Grey to look absolutely terrible. And again, fans were hyped up for that game because again, it's Insomniac Games working on a game, but now you're having Sweet Baby Inc. involved, and now you're having the suspicion and this worrisome when it comes to approaching that game. All because of this one name. Sweet Baby Inc. developed Flintlock The Siege of Dawn, loses nearly 70% of its already anemic player base in just over a week. Flintlock The Siege of Dawn, developed by A44 Games with the help of Sweet Baby Inc. and published by Kepler Interactive, lost nearly 70% of its already anemic user base in just over 1 week since it released. If you go right here, you can see peak player base was 648. And you have to keep in mind that the developers of this game are charging 40 freaking dollars for this game. And yet this game is only about 10 hours long. The cost ratio doesn't make any sense to me. And you can see the drop. It's in the high 60s. It's almost 70%. But when you go to Steam, you can see that the reviews are mostly positive when it comes to this game. However, you're also starting to see some other reviews that are not so positive as we get to this. It's not surprising that the game's player base is quickly shrinking. While the game has mostly positive reviews on Steam, the most helpful review in the last 7 days is negative and tells potential players to avoid the game. Semi-literate Ape writes, this is the review, this game feels unfinished. The store page describes it as a Souls light, and that's what it is, the worst possible ways. Light on the build depth and variety, light on the difficulty, light on the content and length of the damn game. I completed the main story, including all side quests, all Enki feathers, and all shrines in 11.6 hours. I played on normal, so maybe the hard difficulty is more of a challenge, but the big bosses were trivial. Even the final boss fell over pretty quick, and the story's nothing to speak of. Oh, and the game kept crashing for me. Thankfully, the game seems to save its state before exiting, even on a crash, so I never lost any progress. Continues on. Don't get me wrong, I had some fun. I wouldn't have spent 11.6 hours on it if there was no fun to be had, he added. It's particularly satisfying to switch between melee and ranged combat relatively fluidly, or to shoot a suspiciously well placed explosive barrel to clear a pack of enemies, but the fails to make up for everything the game lacks. And again, a game may be good, but as long as Sweet Baby Inc. is involved in it, you're going to have these types of situations where 70% of the player base is already gone. And it does make sense with this game because this game is only about 10 hours long, so it does make sense. But what doesn't make sense is that the game is $40 and it only had a peak concurrent players of about 650. That does not make sense to me. He continues on. Nevertheless, he concluded, overall, I think this game is criminally undercooked. The concept and world had decent potential, and the combat isn't terrible either, so given a few more years of development, I could see this game being pretty good. Sadly, what we got was just mediocre, and on almost all levels, I wouldn't suggest you pay much more than $10 for it. And there it is on Steam. And then there's one more review that I want to get to before we conclude this video. The second most helpful review also does not recommend the game. Nakadimian states, the game is not terrible, it looks great, and I've had no performance issues. However, I can't recommend it because the balance is simply terrible. The game can't decide whether it wants to be Assassin's Creed or a Souls game, so it veers wildly and unexpectedly between difficulties in a way that I found persistently irritating. He continued, most of the time the game is Assassin's Creed, a fun game that requires a little technical gaming expertise. In Flintlock, you follow the quest marker, parkour over obstacles that are clearly marked in white, or zip through rifts that give you an infinite amount of time to choose your direction. If you wander around, you find resources or hidden treasure chests. The game might be more like God of War, but the writing in Flintlock is so dull that I don't want to make the comparison. Flintlock's writing is dull like Assassin's Creed Valhalla is dull. But from time to time, and without warning, the game turns into a Souls-like game. Nakadimian writes the parkour in the Black Powder Factory, for example, is not really difficult, but if you have fallen to your death a million times in Elden Ring to get the thumbprint shield, you might not be used to missing your jumps. The game does not prepare you for the first boss fight, for example, which has 3 phases and requires good parrying skills. That's not a bad thing if the rest of the game had the same vibe, but it doesn't. I love the Parade Master fight in Lies of P. It was engaging and taught you about the game you're about to play. I don't like the swings and difficulty in Flintlock. The combat in its open world is from a different game than the boss combat, and I'm not an impatient player. It took me 2 days to learn to dodge and beat Consort Radon, and 4 days to learn to kill Nameless Puppet. But Flintlock doesn't inspire me to put the time in because the game as a whole doesn't inspire that kind of commitment. If its gameplay were more cohesive or its story more interesting, I might feel differently. Perhaps the devs will return the game in an update, he concluded. And you also can't forget that these are the two most helpful and some of the most recent reviews on Steam when it comes to this game. And they are getting a lot of attraction when it comes to people finding these reviews helpful. You see, this post has 100, while the other one has over 200 people that found it helpful. Anyways, with all that in mind, let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.